Welcome, book lovers! I'm Rachel Barenbaum, author of the novel Atomic Anna, and you're listening to Check This Out, a series where I interview emerging and diverse authors you may not have discovered yet. A series brought to you by New Hampshire Public Radio and the Howe Library in Hanover, New Hampshire. We have a lot of really exciting books and authors coming your way this season. Next week, we'll chat with Yael van der Wooden and hear about her debut, The Safe Keep. You're going to love the book and the author, but today we are listening to our fall 2024 holiday episode, and I'm chatting with three librarians from all around the state talking about our absolute favorite books of the year and offering suggestions for you for this book reading season. Welcome, librarians. I'm so excited to have you guys here.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks. It's great to be here.
My guests today include Sandra Vanderplag. Sandra manages the circulation department at the Howe Library in Hanover, New Hampshire. Welcome, Sandra.
Thanks, Rachel. It's great to be here.
Also joining us today, we have Melissa Mannon. Melissa is the director of the Kingston Community Library and chair of the New Hampshire Library Association's EDI committee. Melissa, welcome.
Thanks, Rachel. Nice to be here.
Also joining me today is Amy Lappin. Amy is the deputy director of the Lebanon Public Libraries and a member of the American Library Association's executive board. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks, Rachel. It's really nice to be here at NHPR today.
I am really excited for this show. This is one of my all-time favorites for book lovers because I get to sit here with these three amazing librarians, Sandra, Amy, and Melissa, and talk about book recommendations. So which one of you wants to kick this off and give me a book recommendation for this reading season?
I can.
Great.
This is Melissa from Kingston Community Library. All of my book recommendations today are diverse and debut authors. The first one is a genre I don't normally read. It's a romance book. And we have a library assistant who is really into romance, and she's been getting me more into it, which is kind of exciting. She actually does a blog at our library. But this one is called Say You'll Be Mine by Nina Kumar. And it's about Indian Americans and Indian culture and arranged marriages. And it's about a couple who set up. The man starts out knowing that he does not want to marry, but he's appeasing his mother by going on these blind dates, basically. And of course, as any good romance has, a relationship develops and the two go through all these things. The kicker is they pretend to be engaged for a large part of the book. And all of the funny things that happen with a pretend engagement really keep the book going. I will definitely read this author's books again. She has a new one coming out in January. She was very funny, full of love. I usually read very somber books. I read a lot of nonfiction, so this was really different for me and really, really fun. So the name of this book is Say You'll Be Mine by Nina Kumar.
So, okay, romance. I'm actually a huge romance fan. On the spicy level, where are we on this book?
I would say on a scale of 0 to 10, this is maybe a 2.
Great. So it is a perfect intro to romance.
Absolutely.
This is Amy, and I do not read a lot of romance, but I do find the ones I've read have tended to sort of have a comedic aspect to them. I mean, is it funny or sad, poignant?
It was definitely funny, but there was a lot in there about family relationships, some seriousness, or the main characters weren't totally happy with who they were and thinking through some self-esteem issues and that kind of thing. For the most part, it was driven by what was happening, which was funny.
This is Sandra. So, Melissa, it sounds like a kind of a rom-com vibe.
Absolutely. I could see this being a movie. Yeah. And the fact that she has a book coming out in January so quickly, I really think that this book is going to catch on. Say You'll Be Mine by Nina Kumar.
Can't wait to read it. Sandra, do you have a recommendation for us?
Well, I'll take us in a different direction. I'm a fan of post-apocalyptic fiction. So not apocalyptic where the bad stuff is currently happening, but what's happening after the bad stuff and the humans that remain trying to make sense and move on. So the book that I'm recommending today is called Sky Full of Elephants by Sibo Campbell. And the apocalypse that happened is that one day all the white people in America, they have all walked to some body of water and drowned themselves. And so our protagonist, Charlie, is a black man, and it's 1 year later, and he's teaching at Howard University in D.C., an HBCU. And we learn pretty quickly that he was in prison when the event happened. And one of the first things that happens early on is that his daughter, who he's never met, reaches out to him from the Midwest. She's in Wisconsin, and she wants to go to Orange Beach, Alabama. His daughter's mother was white, and she lived with her mother, her stepfather, and two younger brothers, who all one day walked out the door of the house into the lake in the backyard and drowned themselves. And she tried to go with them. This is the only family she's ever known, but she couldn't. She didn't drown. There's a lot in this book that treats generational trauma of being a Black person in the United States, but there's a lot of hope as well. And it reminded me of Station 11, a post-apocalyptic novel. They travel across the country very much like the characters do in Station 11. The characters are all exploring identity and belonging at the same time as we're learning about Charlie and Sydney's story. Sydney is his daughter. We also learn about Vivian and Hosea, who are in Alabama, which is where Sydney needs to go. Alabama is now a kingdom.
I love novels where you just wipe out what we know. And it's kind of like erasing all of the baggage so that the author can get straight to the point of whatever they want to write about.
Yeah. And it's really a commentary on the current systems, right? So I found the story of Sky Full of Elephants by Sibo Campbell. It was a compelling story. The characters are complex and likable. There's suspense, there's magic, there's connection, family, love, and music. I highly recommend Sky Full of Elephants.
It's really making me think of The Leftovers by Tom Perrotta. I think if you loved that novel, you would love Sky Full of Elephants, because in The Leftovers, also all of a sudden a huge swath of the population, they don't die, they just disappear. And the people who are left over are left wondering what happened. We will put a list filled with all of these books on our website, nhpr.org. Check that out at any time. And of course, you can go to your library and check these books out. Amy, tell me, what books do you have?
Well, first, I want to say that I am so excited that Sandra talked about Sky Full of Elephants, because that is on my long short list of books that I want to read. So I'm glad to hear about it and get the recommendation. The first book I wanted to talk about today is a book that is not a romance, but it is about love. And it's called 888 Love and the Divine Burden of Numbers by Abraham Chang. It is a debut novel, and it is a book full of love. It's very funny. It takes place in New York in the 1990s, and our main character, Young, is a high school student for part of it, and a college student, and then a little bit beyond for the rest of the novel. But he is obsessed, I will say, with numbers, and he is sure that his seventh love will be the one. And it goes back and forth in time. And he's with his sixth love, Arena, who he meets at NYU. But it goes back to recount all of his loves before her, which include, like his third grade crush and his high school prom date. And then the question is Arena going to be number 7? But she's already 6, so how could she be 7? But it feels like destiny to him. And the really great part about this novel for me is it is very steeped in 1990s culture. Young loves movies. He loves music. Some of the chapters have playlists with them, so you can download the music, and listen to what Young would have been listening to.
Oh, I would love to hear that. Let's take a listen. All right. Books using playlists.
It's just a really enjoyable novel and fun, and brought me back to a time and a place. I was not an Asian boy in the 1990s New York at all, but boy, I could identify with Young. Some of the chapters, he has conversations in his head with John Hughes and Quentin Tarantino and other directors, movie directors from the 1990s. And because I think of my age, I'm a little older than Young would have been, but that was definitely my time. So I can really relate to a lot of the Western culture that Young brings to it. It also goes back and forth. He travels to China. At one time, his family is Chinese, and there's all sorts of things about his family's culture that impact his life and his way that he's thinking. I recommend 888 Love and the Divine Burden of Numbers by Abraham Chang.
Amy, I'm so glad you brought this book in because this book by Abraham Chang, 888 Love, was actually one of our finalists for the season. I really wanted to have him on the show, but we were out of spots. So I was so thrilled to see that on the list today. I also highly recommend it. I mean, I just love this idea that one gets just 7 loves in their
Yeah.
life because that seems like a lot of loves, but maybe not enough.
Yes. I found the ending very satisfying because there's certain people you're rooting for in the book to be love number 7, and the end did not resolve everything, but it was very satisfying and it was very true to the book. I just enjoyed every moment of it.
888 Love by Abraham Chang.
This is Melissa.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about the significance of the numbers in the book. Does it get into numbers a lot? Because that's a deep part of Chinese culture.
Yes, it really does. And part of that comes from his uncle, who has always told him about the significance of numbers in the Chinese culture. So, yeah, numbers play a huge part in the book and in how Young thinks.
Amy, this is Sandra. So it's not math, though, right?
I had to do no math to get through this book. Absolutely not. The numbers are often when Young is trying to make decisions in his life or think about things, he wants things to make sense, right? And sometimes love doesn't make sense.
If you're just joining us, I'm Rachel Barenbaum. You're listening to Check This Out from NHPR. And today we have a very special episode. I have 3 librarians with me here in the studio, and we are giving our book recommendations for this reading season. I get to also give a book recommendation, which I'm very excited about because I get so many amazing books that come to me for this show, and unfortunately, a very limited number of episodes compared to the number of books that hit my desk. The first one that I want to recommend today is called Songs for the Brokenhearted by Ayelet Sabari. This book is about a young Yemeni Israeli woman who thinks she knows everything there is to know about her mother, but of course, she doesn't. And what I really loved about this book is it takes on secret romance, which is a trope that I love, although this is not a tropey book. This is very much, a high fiction. It also brings me to Yemen, which I really knew very little about, mud huts, caves, and a beautiful new language. And there's a beautiful playlist that goes along with it, and also an immigration story. And it takes us into a very different time in the Middle East and a very different country that I just knew nothing about. Songs for the Brokenhearted by Ayelet Sabari. It's absolutely gorgeous. And if it's not on your bookshelf or on your to be read list yet, put it on there because it is so good.
Rachel, I'm interested that your book has a playlist and so did Amy's.
Yeah.
Is that a feature of new fiction these days?
Yes, I will say lots of writers that I know are doing playlists, artists too, of all genres. But this book in particular, Songs for the Brokenhearted, features songs and Yemeni traditional music. So you hear and see songs throughout the book. On this playlist, if you follow it, you will hear traditional Yemeni songs. Well, they're sort of modernized, actually. Like you could hear them playing in a club today, right? Let's hear what it sounds like.
جاي محب بادي هذا تمم مع غانا غانا والكلام الحليا مشلي.
But you hear songs in a language that was completely new to me and just fascinating. And I love books that take me to a whole new world. And Songs for the Brokenhearted does that.
It seems like infusing music is an enriching way to also learn and explore a different culture.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I loved the playlist for this book. Thank you to the author, Ayelet Sabari.
What time period is that set in, Rachel?
The book is actually set, it's a braided narrative between 1995 and the 1950s, and it goes back and forth between Yemen and Israel. And I actually got to see the author give an author talk. Ayelet Sabari spoke, and it's based on her own family history, leaving Yemen in the early 1930s. So I love it when authors really bring in this family history, this side that you don't get to see in everyday life, and that you can see in fiction, where we can really feel what it's like to pull your family to walk literally literally out of Yemen and how many days and months that took to get out of there. And then the boats and to really feel that experience, you really get that in this novel, Songs for the Brokenhearted by Ayelet Sabari.
This is Sandra. As long as we're outside the United States, I'll tell you a little bit about Shanghai Landers by Julie Min. This book tells the story of the Yang family who live for the most part in Shanghai. The book starts in 2040 and works backwards to 2013. The story of this family is told in reverse, and each chapter is told by a different member of the family. So it's first-person narration. The dad is originally from Shanghai. The mom was born in Japan but grew up in France, and they have 3 daughters who are all born in Shanghai and spend a little time in the U.S. So you're learning about Chinese culture, Japanese culture, French culture, family dynamics, and a lot of sibling relationships, birth order impacted, how each child is treated or not treated. One child might be on the spectrum, it seems. There are a couple of chapters that are also narrated by folks that work for the family. So the driver who grew up in Shanghai. We also meet the nanny and learn about she grew up in the countryside and what life is like for working people in China. There were no playlists to tell me about what it might have sounded like, but the writing varied by who was the narrator. So the mom is an embroidery artist whose topic is nature, and the writing is very lyrical and almost poetic. And then the driver of the family wants to race cars. So his chapter is very frenetic. And it's a beautiful book. Shanghai Landers by Julie Min.
One of the interesting things for me about Shanghai Landers is it's actually a lead title for Spiegel and Grau, who's a newish publisher. And this is one of their first big splashes, I believe. And I always think it's fun to see new publishers breaking out with big books. I'm Rachel Barenbaum. You're listening to Check This Out on NHPR. We're talking about recommendations for this book reading season with my guests, my librarian friends.
This is Melissa. My second book is called Memento Mori by Eunice Hong. Memento Mori means remember death, and that's what this book is about. It's much more cerebral than the first book about romance. This book was released in 2024 after winning the Red Hen Fiction Award in 2021. So as a librarian and a former reference librarian, of course, I had to look up what is that. So the award gives a monetary prize plus book publication to the winner. So this is a debut author. It is very unusual. It's called a work of elliptical writing, which means it omits words or parts of sentences to convey meaning in an artful way. Elliptical authors, just to give you an idea, Ernest Hemingway and Virginia Woolf are considered elliptical authors. So the writing is very short, to the point, no extra words. I've read it once. I need to read it at least one more time to pull more out of it. It's not really a book you're going to read once, but you could get through it quickly. The main character of the book explores the meaning of life by relating thoughts through myths and memories. The family is a Korean family that was split up when Korea was split, so there's some talk about North and South and missing family. The family is living in the United States, but the father and mother travel back and forth to Korea, and the kids are in the United States. So the main character is writing to her younger brother. That's how this opens up, to convey her thoughts about death through mythology. So this would be one place where if you're really into mythology, you would dive in. There's a lot I don't know about mythology, so I want to go back and look at that again. But in addition to the stories she's related, she's also telling about what's happening in her family. Her grandparents are getting older and are sick, so she's reflecting on death there. Throughout the book, she talks of family relationships, multiple generations, which is very significant in Asian culture. The older generations remembering back. There's a lot about memory in here. The beginning of the book reflects on the meaning of life in somewhat abstract terms. And as you get further in, you get more into what's happening to the family. And it's less abstract and more grounded in what is happening in her real life. Even though it's really somber, it's a dark comedy. So there's funniness in there as well. I really love this book, and as a librarian, I take out most of my books, but this is one I'm going to purchase because I think I'm going to go back to it and read it and read parts of it over and over again. And the book is called Memento Mori by Eunice Hong.
I love that this book came out of the Red Hen Press competition. They're a smaller indie press, and they publish amazing books. They really get new voices out there. How did you find this book? Because this is not going to be a mainstream book for everybody.
So I found this in book reviews. And what's interesting, or I think is interesting, is, and I get this question a lot, how do librarians find books? Well, we have professional journals that give us little summaries of the book and then recommend them. And this came out of that. One of the interesting things that I find about these journals is it used to be mainstream publishers, but now more and more they're doing indie publications.
That's amazing. So Memento Mori by Eunice Hung came out of that. Amy, what book do you have for us today?
The next book, and the one I'm the most excited about today, is Whale Fall, which is a debut novel by Elizabeth O'Connor. And it's interesting, Melissa was talking about wanting to read Memento Mori again, and Whale Fall is a book that I will definitely read again. And perhaps I will purchase it. I think people think all librarians must have rooms full of books in their house. I think you'd be surprised at how few I actually own because I consider my library to be my living room. And so I have all those books at my fingertips. So I rarely buy, especially fiction. I think I tend to purchase more nonfiction. I will definitely be buying Whale Fall. This book, it is not long. It's actually really rather short, but it is one of the most beautifully written books that I have read in a long time. It takes place in Wales, I think in 1938. It's on a small island that is a very, very harsh place to live. There are 12 families remaining there, and many of the men had gone off in World War I and not come back, and other people have left for England. But the people who are there, they're living a really difficult life. They rely on what they have. They rely on what the sea brings them, and the sea is not always kind. Nobody on the island actually knows how to swim because the sea is a dangerous place, but there it is, and that's what they rely on. And it's told from the point of view of 18-year-old Maynard, who has some decisions to make about whether she stays or she goes. And two ethnographers, Joan and Edward, show up from England to record the way of life out there. And so it's a very much a book about how we get to identify ourselves, how we let others' perceptions of us. The book they're writing about the island, Joan and Edward, is almost comical. They're just deciding why people are doing certain things and certain rituals and how people work. And it's just absolutely a gorgeous book. I also listened to it, so I guess I have read it twice at this point. This does not have a soundtrack, but they do a really beautiful job. First of all, some of it's in Welsh. The main character says things in Welsh, and the names are Welsh. So it was really nice to listen to things. I do not speak Welsh, or read it. So it was nice to kind of just be able to hear the correct pronunciation. But partway through, when Joan and Edward start making recordings of the islanders, they then have these little interludes where you hear people singing the folk songs, telling their own stories. And it's so beautifully, beautifully done. The singing and just the folk tales. But you also can see, because you know enough about the island at that point, why some of those stories were being told.
Let's take a listen.
Paham ai dicter o myfanwy yn llenwys lygau dion dir a sreddiau tirion o myfanwy heb ryd wrth fy ngweledi.
I love it.
I cannot say enough about Whale Fall by Elizabeth O'Connor.
That sounds beautiful, Amy. Is the author, this is Sandra, is the author Welsh?
She is from Birmingham, England. She does have a note at the end of the book that it is not based on an actual island, but it is based on several islands. It's a really harsh way of life, but the people are not harsh. I really liked the characters. It's not a funny book, but there's a lot of love in it.
We're talking about Whale Fall by Elizabeth O'Connor. And Amy, I love that you mentioned the audiobook.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people say to me, oh, am I reading if I listen to an audiobook? Oh, I see Amy has an answer.
Yes, you are reading. Absolutely. I've listened to audiobooks for a long time. I love audiobooks, and boy, have they gotten a lot better. They are so unbelievably well done. I listened to a book that Meryl Streep read this summer. You absolutely are. One thing I get from audiobooks is that I'm a pretty serious reader, and I don't mean that I read serious things. I mean, when I read something, I'm concentrating on it so hard, sometimes I miss the humor. And when I listen to an audiobook, I'm like, oh, that was funny. Oh, I see what's happening here. I cannot say enough about audiobooks. And first of all, they can make a commute go a lot faster. There are people who have a variety of like learning based language differences, and you get to keep up with everyone else. And it's just a different way of experiencing a story. And the way that this one was produced was amazing.
So here in the studio, I see all three librarians that are here right today. Melissa, Sandra, and Amy are all nodding their heads vigorously, very excited about audiobooks. Do you guys want to chime in about your love for audiobooks?
This is Sandra. I'll just say if I've been commuting all week with a book, I will often on Friday see if we have it physically. I mostly listen in the car because I also like to curl up on the couch with the cat and the book, and it's a different immersive kind of experience. But I've more than once I will be listening and add reading, or I will sometimes use the audiobook as a way into a book that a lot of people have been talking about and promoting, but it just hasn't grabbed me for whatever reason. And often the audio will. And I will echo Amy that the narration makes a huge difference.
This is Amy, and that is such a good point. I often also will get the print copy, so I will listen when I'm in my car, especially if it's a book that I just like don't want to be without. So I'll listen while I'm driving around. Then I get in bed, I read, then I find my place in the audiobook. And you're so right. It's such a great entrance into a book, especially I find when it's a difficult book or very complicated.
Or maybe a topic that feels like, oh, this is going to be heavy, but somehow having someone tell you the story,
Right?
you feel a little more comfortable diving in.
This is Melissa. I'm a former high school librarian, so having a book that kids can listen to while they read is sometimes something that is very educational and can boost their understanding, boost vocabulary. So if you have any parents out there, that's a good way to go. For me, listening to audiobooks is like candy. I won't listen to the more serious books. I love nonfiction, but I will always read my nonfiction. But I'm also a mystery lover, and there's nothing better than a good audio mystery on my commute.
Yeah. I have to say that this is music to my ears on the writer side, because you guys are talking about you'll buy the paper copy or like the hardback or whatever, right? A physical copy and the audiobook. That's two copies right there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like it's actually selling more books. Plus, I adore listening to audiobooks, and I will often be listening to an audiobook and reading even a totally different book at night, and then another one for the show. If you're just joining us, I'm Rachel Barenbaum, and you're listening to Check This Out from New Hampshire Public Radio. We have a very special episode today. We are hearing book recommendations from three amazing librarians, and all of these recommendations will be on our website, nhpr.org.
Rachel, do you have another book to recommend to us? Librarians love hearing about books people are reading too.
Yes, the next book that I want to talk about is Better Must Come. It's by Desmond Hall. And this book also just transported me to a whole other world, very much like Songs for the Brokenhearted by Ayelet Sabari. Although instead of being in Yemen and the Middle East and Israel, here we go to Jamaica. And this book is about Deja. She's a barrel girl, and that is a Jamaican kid who gets barrels full of clothes, food, and treats shipped to her from parents who have moved to the U.S. to make money. And so her mother is sending her barrels of stuff, and then her mother is mugged, and Deja is left basically with nothing. She's out fishing because she's hungry. And then comes the really interesting part, dun, dun, dun. She finds a boat with a badly wounded man who gives her a backpack filled with $500,000. And he says, you have to take it to this one person. Enter a love interest, Gabriel, who's actually a part of a rival gang who's after that $500,000. So it's lots of fun. There's mystery, there's suspense. You're scared for Deja, but you're also learning about Jamaica and this whole different world and this life that she is trying to make for herself. It's called Better Must Come by Desmond Hall. He's actually also a local author. I love talking about local authors. He's based in Boston, and I highly recommend it and his other books as well.
That sounds so good. This is Amy. That sounds so good. And that's more of a contemporary novel?
Yes, it's more contemporary, and it's actually YA, but it doesn't really read as YA, so that's young adult. That means that the scenes maybe aren't as explicit as they might be in adult fiction, but still YA novels can really deal with some tough, heavy things, and those really hard themes are in this book, and that's the power of this book. The author, Desmond Hall, does not shy away from showing how hard life can be for his main character, Deja. And it's just, it just had me from page one. Better Must Come by Desmond Hall.
Rachel, this is Sandra. That's reminding me of another book I brought along today to recommend, and it's called Women and Children First by Alina Grabowski. If you liked Olive Kittredge, this one might appeal to you. It's a similar format. It's set in coastal Massachusetts, and interestingly, it's blurbed by Elin Hillenbrand, who, writes beach reads on Nantucket about the wealthier classes. This book is actually about the folks that live in those communities year-round. And the main event that happens is that a high school girl dies mysteriously at a house party. And the story is told by 10 women and girls from the community. Each one has her own chapter. You hear from a classmate, from the guidance counselor, from the principal, from the best friend. And it's pretty gritty, and it's all of those challenging aspects of growing up. And I would say in terms of diversity, it's really more that economic class diversity that shows up. And it's more character driven than plot, because pretty much from the beginning that this one person has died. And I found myself a little bit flipping back when I would be on, say, the third chapter. You'd go, oh, I think the narrator here was mentioned in an earlier chapter. So you're flipping back to kind of create this web, this network of the community. So it's not necessarily a feel-good, happily ever after kind of story, but it's not completely devastating and tragic. It's pretty real. People struggling to figure out life. I think the depictions of high school and its social challenges are very real from student, administrator, and staff perspectives. And you kind of have that, there's nothing anonymous in a small town feel. So this is Women and Children First by Alina Grabowski.
Sandra, I love that you brought up that this is really character-driven more than plot-driven.
Yeah, this is not a whodunit, and it's less page-turning and suspense and more of a picture that slowly builds and never quite comes fully into focus, but we learn about these 10 girls and women and their individual lives and families, but really about this community. And we explore adolescence and family relationships and connections. And I think that's what makes it relatable, right? We've pretty much all been adolescents. We've pretty much all been parts of families and communities, for better or for worse. So it's an opportunity to feel a connection to the author and those characters. Women and Children First by Alina Grabowski.
If you're just joining us, I'm Rachel Barenbaum. You're listening to Check This Out from NHPR. And today we have a very special show. I have 3 guests. They are all librarians, and they are offering us recommendations of books to read this reading season. Melissa, what do you have for us up next?
I have another young adult book. I really love young adult books. It's one of my favorite genres. And I agree with what we were talking about before. Teen books really dive deeply into issues that affect all of us. And sometimes they're better written than the adult books. And I think this is one of them. It's called Shut Up, This is Serious by Carolina Ixta. Ixta is a daughter of Mexican immigrants, and she's diving into Mexican-American culture a little bit here. It's a young adult coming-of-age novel, and the main characters are in Oakland. The main character is a high school senior, Baylin, who is dealing with many difficult issues. Her father abandons their family, and then her mother is left with Baylin and her older sister. And the family's basically an emotional wreck. The mother doesn't know what to do with herself. The sister's off doing her own thing, and Baylin is kind of left by herself, not knowing what to do and getting into trouble. Baylin's friend Letty gets pregnant and is dealing with that issue, and the girlfriends need to lean on each other, but they all have their own issues going on. Baylin starts sleeping around a little bit, and we're swept along with Baylin through her relationships as basically she finds herself and works towards strengthening family relationships. This particular book is uplifting at the end. And there's strong material in it about family relationships, race, socioeconomic class, sex, sexism, depression, and adolescence. So it's really packed full of different issues that are heavy. Shut Up, This is Serious by Carolina Ixta. Whenever I read a book like this, it brings me back to being a teen, because as we get older, we kind of forget what it's like. and how many of the issues that teens have are similar to issues we currently have, though we might have better tools to deal with that now as adults. Shut Up, This is Serious by Carolina Ixta. It's so important to have these kinds of books because I remember Judy Blume being very edgy when I was young and really opening my eyes and making me feel not alone when dealing with issues like this. And to have these books on our shelves now, I think is really important because we all have different issues, and to know that we're not alone and to be able to see our own faces, all the diversity in these books is important as well.
This is Amy. I love that Melissa and Rachel both brought up young adult books because I think maybe the young adult title should be going away. So many adults read out of our teen room. And I think that is because the authors are just unbelievable. There's so many, many really good books for young adults. I feel like when I was a teenager, there were some, but there was a quicker jump from like the children's room into the adult section. But I remember our young adult section in my home library being a bookshelf or two. Maybe some Paul Zindel in there. So I'm so glad you brought those up because the writing is extraordinary in many of those books for everyone, not just for teens.
Yeah, so actually another book that I wanted to talk about is called Flyboy by Casey LeBlanc, and it's again YA, and it's a trans story. It's about a boy who visits a magic-filled circus in his dreams in order to escape reality, where his trans identity remains a secret. The author, I also went to an author talk for Casey, and he was saying that he wrote this book because there were really no books about trans kids on the shelves, and he wanted to put them out there, and he wanted to have those for kids but also for adults. I think that he's been surprised at how many grown-ups are reading it and experiencing the same, even though Flyboy by Casey LeBlanc is technically YA. The audience there is so much wider.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You're listening to Check This Out from New Hampshire Public Radio. I'm Rachel Barenbaum, and today we have a very special show. My guests today are 3 librarians, and we are talking about book recommendations for this holiday season. But one thing I want to talk about is sort of the elephant in the room with writers and with publishers, which are self-published titles. All of the librarians are smiling and nodding or making faces here in the room. It is upending publishing in many ways. I'm a writer. I talk about this all the time with my writer friends. Should we self-publish? Do we stay traditional? Romance, romantasy, sci-fi. These are even some mysteries. They're flying off of the shelves, self-published. Do you have self-published books at the libraries? What do you have to say about it? I feel like there are lots of comments brewing in the room right now.
This is Amy. I'll start. I think that self-publishing is great, but it all comes down to the quality of what you're putting out there. And you can self-publish something that is fantastic, and you can self-publish something that isn't. Well, yes, we do have some self-published books in the library. We still, as librarians, and we're still looking for reviews. I still need to know what it's about, but I also still need to know that it's of some quality. And that can be really hard for an author. It can be the best book ever, but to get someone to review it, you don't have that machine of the publisher behind you to get somebody to get it into Booklist or School Library Journal or wherever. We're spending, in our case, municipal dollars, and we need to make sure that what we're getting not only is quality, but is something that's going to leave our shelves.
This is Sandra. At how, practically speaking, from a library point of view, echoing Amy about our stewardship of municipal dollars, the other piece is cataloging. That's a behind the scenes thing that happens, but it's important. Most of the cataloging that happens in public libraries is what we call copy cataloging. We're not originally looking at every single book and deciding what should the subject headings be. But if it's not a book that is reviewed or published majorly, or there isn't cataloging in publication data, this is getting pretty technical, then you have to think about the staff time as well as, frankly, the staff ability to originally catalog. Not many public libraries will have someone on staff who originally catalogs.
This is Melissa. I am a self-published author, so I can see it from the writer's perspective as well. My writings are nonfiction related to taking care of personal papers because I'm an archivist. There's something to be said as a writer for going through the process, whether you hire your own professional editor or you are writing for a professional publishing house and you have that house kind of directing you. There's something to be said for that too.
So I ask this question also specifically thinking about romance. So if we take a statistic like 90% of authors will sell less than majorly published authors in Random House, Simon & Schuster, will sell less than 1,000 copies of their book. But then you look at romance, for example, The Wingman that came out by Stephanie Archer just 2 or 3 months ago. That book has already sold more than 30,000 copies. And it's self-published. So if you look at that from those numbers, any of the books that we're talking about today, which are beautiful and gorgeous and we love them, but maybe they're going to sell 1,000 copies versus The Wingman, which might have some typos or whatever, but is selling 30,000 copies. How do you look at that as librarians when someone comes in and says, why can't you buy The Wingman?
This is Amy. Maybe I can. If you come to me and it's in demand, and then I will buy it, because it's not all about extremely well-reviewed books. I mean, I always say to people who come into the library, this is your library. It's not my library. I want to have what you want to read here. So absolutely. And I think there's some inherent unfairness. It's not fair to self-published authors necessarily that they need to be part of this big publishing machine to get my attention. I completely understand that. So once a book gets some traction, I would absolutely consider it.
This is Melissa. When you look at what an author makes off a self-published book versus when they go with a publishing house, that makes a huge difference. One of the reasons I did self-publish, the publisher offered to pick me up for like 30 cents a book, whereas I would be making $10 a book if I self-publish. So
It's a very big difference.
Yeah, and this is Amy. And the other piece of it, I think, with self-publishing that's become interesting is the electronic format, right? Like an ebook. If I wrote a romance, and I could get it to you in a way that did not involve me photocopying papers in my basement or whatever I would have had to do, right? I have a method to get it to you without having to ship anything to you. And so, yeah, I think I know. And, we have some breakthrough authors every now and then. Like, she was self-published until she wasn't. So
Colleen Hoover.
Colleen Hoover was the one in my head. Yes. Yeah.
And this is Sandra. There's also social media. So back in the day, you needed the publishing house to market your book. But now you just can be on Book Talk and it's all over.
This is amazing. I love this conversation.
I could talk about collection development all day long.
Oh, I would too. I could too. Let's have a whole show on.
If you're just joining us, I'm Rachel Barenbaum. You're listening to Check This Out from NHPR. My guests today are 3 librarians, and we are talking to them about book recommendations for this book reading season.
This is Amy. I have a very, very short book. I believe it's a novella. It's a debut author. It's called The Most by Jessica Anthony. I love to read short stories, and this is a short novel, because I am always stunned by the amount of story that a person who writes extremely well can put in very few words in very few pages. And this is one of those. It felt like I had really read way more than I had. She's so economical in her words. And it is about a woman, I believe it's 1959 in Delaware. And she is a former college tennis pro, and she's married the handsome insurance man. And they have 2 kids. And they get up one Sunday morning, and the husband comes out and says, "Let's head to church." She says, "Oh, I'm not going." And Kathy decides she's going into the apartment complex pool, which she was excited about when they moved into the apartment complex. She's never seen anyone use it. And here it is November, but it's in the 70s. And she gets into the pool and decides she's not coming out. And they get home from church, and Mom's still in the pool. And they kind of ignore her, and he's trying to get to his golf game. And the kids aren't even interested in going in the pool, and everyone's getting kind of hungry for lunch. And Mom does not come out of the pool. And they say, "Well, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." And she's down there smoking cigarettes and hanging in the pool. It was fascinating about what's really going on sometimes behind the facade of someone's marriage. And it's also very much about motherhood, and it's about being a woman in 1959, but it's obviously also about being a woman in 2024. The Most by Jessica Anthony. It's excellent.
Amy, I loved that book. I read it too. Yes. Talk about the absurd.
Yes.
Right? It gives us a way into talking about gender roles, marriage. I mean, she's just in the pool. She won't get out of the pool.
That's the story.
That's the
You
story.
talk about, like, is it plot driven? No, it's just Mom goes into the pool and in her old bathing suit that the husband doesn't really like, and can't figure out why she's put that old thing on, and why is Mom in the pool, and Mom says she's fine.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I couldn't put it down. That was the whole plot.
Right?
I couldn't put it down. Yes.
But
The
there's
Most.
so much underneath it. So much going on.
The Most by Jessica Anthony.
This is Melissa. My mind immediately went to the short story written by Charlotte Perkins Gilman called A Yellow Wallpaper from the 19th century. If you haven't read it, you must read it. It's one of the best things I've ever read. But there's a thread between the book that you just discussed and that book, which is also about motherhood and socioeconomic status, and a woman whose child was taken from her to be given to her nanny. So she had nothing to do with her life. And now in the 50s, the woman can go in the pool and deal with her issues that way. I just loved it.
This book is not funny, it's not humorous, but there are some lines, here she is, she's been in the pool for hours by dinner. And they're like, well, what's for dinner? They're yelling at her like from the balcony. Virgil, the father, hasn't figured out that she's not getting out of the pool to make their dinner.
The Most by Jessica Anthony.
And this is Melissa. The last book I have to recommend is The Blueprint by Ray Gianna Rashad. And this is a dystopian novel. This is about an alternate historical timeline after the United States was engaged in a second civil war in the latter part of the 20th century, and Black people remain in servitude to whites in the South. The lives people are living are ruled by an algorithm that decides who they're going to marry and what they're going to do. This is set in Texas, and the one way a pretty young Black woman can get out of her destiny is to have one of the leaders of this place fall in love with her, and then she basically becomes a concubine. But many of the women feel that they have true love and don't see themselves that way. But once they start to, many of them try to escape. And in this alternate reality, Louisiana is a place where people can be freed. So they're trying to escape there. The main character is named Selene Bonet, and she seeks parallels and solace in the life of an ancestor who lived in the 19th century and was a slave. And she decides to write about her ancestor, Henriette, and her life. Selene loves the man she ends up with, but she's torn between wanting her freedom and being with him and living a cushy life with him, but she's not free. And she eventually decides to try to escape, but is brought back. Basically, all the decisions she makes in this book have ramifications for the rest of her life. It was not a comfortable book to read, but it was very interesting. There's a lot to consider here, and that's Blueprint by Ray Gianna Rashad.
This is Sandra. Melissa, thanks for sharing that story. There are parts of it that parallel Troubled Waters by Marianne Heglar. This is climate fiction, and the author is a debut novelist who normally writes nonfiction about climate. And the protagonist of this story, Corinne, she is growing up in 2013-14. She's a college student and she wants to be a climate activist. She's grown up in a Black family, and her grandmother was a child integrating elementary schools in Nashville in 1955. So it is really about activism. New Orleans and Mississippi and Oberlin are the setting. Civil rights and the climate crisis, comparing activism in both of these elements of American history. And it's an examination of individual action and societal change. Troubled Waters by Marianne Heglar.
That gave me chills. Rachel, did you have any other books you wanted to recommend to us?
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for asking. A book that I absolutely loved and also really wanted to have on the show was The Rich People Have Gone Away by Regina Porter. This book I loved because really the main idea is that no one leaves the past behind completely. And that I just think is such a powerful premise, theme, idea to put into a book. Regina Porter throws us into the COVID lockdown in 2020. A husband and wife head up to upstate New York to wait it out. But of course, not everyone gets out of the city, and there's an examination of who is able to escape the city, who has these fancy homes and who doesn't. And then we also dig into this couple that goes upstate. It's a husband and wife. The wife is pregnant and she goes missing. And of course, the husband is the prime suspect. So there's a little bit of a murder mystery. There's the COVID times, or the haves and have-nots, and how different people rode that out. Regina Porter is really a powerhouse. I just loved this book, and I can't recommend it enough. The Rich People Have Gone Away by Regina Porter. Sandra, Amy, and Melissa, thank you so much for joining me today. This was such a pleasure.
Thank you, Rachel. This is Sandra. It was fantastic.
And this is Melissa. Thank you. And thank you to my colleagues.
Thank you, Rachel. This is Amy. And yeah, we could just talk about books all day. So this was really fun. Thank you for having us.
We kind of do talk about books.
We do.
You've been listening to Check This Out, a literary series which is a partnership between New Hampshire Public Radio and the Howe Library in Hanover, New Hampshire. We dive deeply into the works of emerging and diverse authors you may not have discovered yet. Next week is Yael van der Wouden and her debut, The Safe Keep. You can check out all of the books that we've talked about here today on our website, nhpr.org. And of course, you can go to your local library and pick up a copy. Our producer today is Jessica Hunt. The How Library Director is Ruby Simon. NHPR's Program Director is Emily Quirk. The show is sponsored by the Jack and Dorothy Byrne Foundation and the How Library Corporation. I'm Rachel Barenbaum. Remember to go to your local library and check out a copy of all of the books you hear about on the show and all of the books that you heard about today, or go to your local bookstore and buy a copy. Thanks for listening. See you next time.